Barguments is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
What's up, everybody?
Dan!
Welcome into another edition of Barguments. Once again, I'm your host, Dan Levy. He is Joe Filippo, and we are joined by a former radio giant, now podcast legend, SDR Show, and part of the GAS. I don't have to say it's a giant. Is that a podcast network? Is that what that is, Ralph?
Yes. Good research on your part there. Yes. So GaSDigital is a podcast network. We have about 15 shows on the network, get about 5 million listeners a week. GAS stands for Gomez and Sutton. I am Ralph Sutton. My business partner is Louis J. Gomez, and we thought it sounded better than SAG, so we went with GAS.
Ralph Sutton, thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it, bud.
No worries. Yeah, not at all. And I did radio for a very long time. I had a rock radio show called The Tour Bus, and it was on about 100 stations syndicated nationally from 1999 to 2016. And in 2014, I started the podcast, the SDR Show, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Show, with a comedian named Big J. Okerson. We did it for about 10 years together. And then recently, his schedule just got a little too chaotic, and I brought on a new co-host named Dub Davidoff.
The Tour Bus, was that ever on in Chicago?
It was on, right outside Chicago. There's that station, WIIL, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's, we were on out there. And then I think we might have been on Chicago for a hot minute as well. You know, I mean, you're in radio, so you would know this, but like what happens every time a new program director, at least back then, would come in, they would try to shake stuff up. So we're going to change the programming. So we'd be on, every week was a state of flux. That's why I would say about 100 stations. I think our max was like 104. And then our lowest was like, as we grew, maybe like 80 when we stopped the network. I don't remember, but, it was a long time ago. We stopped in 2014, so over 10 years ago.
All right. Well, I got a really dumb question for you, but it's one that I think that a lot of radio people even now would like to know. How did you start syndicating yourself like that? I mean, everybody in radio is always, how do I, if I have an idea, how do I make it and how do I network this out?
It was wild. I will tell you this. So we did a show at the original title of the show was called Modern Classics. And the idea was my version of classic rock, because I'm 55 now. And so we're going back. I was 30 something and they were still playing Led Zeppelin and The Doors were classic rock when I was 17. And it was classic rock when I was 30. And this makes no sense.
It's still classic rock now.
So it's still classic rock to this day, which is insane. But so I started a show called Modern Classics. It was on for 2 hours on a station in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, from 10 to midnight on Sundays. And I really cliff noted, got the job because I was a strip club DJ, and I met another strip club DJ who was a radio DJ, and he got me an audition. That's how that started. And then we did well. We moved to the number one rock station in Jersey called WDHA. And I started looking around and I saw discarded CDs of potential syndicated shows that my program director had passed on. Ugh. So I took them all and mocked our show to look like that in terms of a leaflet, like a one sheet to promote the show. And I sent the show to all those companies that were trying to get on my radio station, pretending that we were a show looking for a new syndicator home, which was total bullshit, And I'm sorry, I don't know if you curse on this, but
of course,
podcasting only, because I know you did radio, I don't know if you multi-purpose this, but anyway, so we eventually heard back from a couple of companies and signed with one. And the first 3 or 4 months, I didn't know. I was so new to radio. I'd only been doing radio for 4 or 5 months. And I didn't know there was a difference between being syndicated and being syndicatable. So we were available, but who the hell's taking a show by some jackass in New York that you've never heard of? So we weren't getting on any other stations. And this company was taking a big flyer for us because they were putting us up in the satellite and nobody was taking us. So then me and my co-host, the show was Saturday nights at that time from 8 to midnight. We moved to 8 to midnight. After the show on midnight, we drove to Miami, from New Jersey to Miami, all the way down listening to the radio. And if anybody was playing anything remotely on brand with what we played, we were 80s rock, so they're playing AC/DC, they're playing Guns N' Roses, they're playing Def Leppard. We'd write down the station and the city we were in. We get to Miami, we stayed there for 2-3 days. We called all those stations. We set up about 9 meetings. We snaked our way back up the East Coast and came back in a week with 5 affiliates.
Wow.
That we did on our own. Our syndication company couldn't get us one in 3 months. We got 5 in a week, and we made it back just in time to start the show again the following Saturday. And that's how we started the syndication.
That's a hustle right there.
Yeah, it was wild.
That is amazing, because the question I would always have, how would you even know how much to charge these people to pay you to even have it on?
We had a syndication company, so we used them as the business model. And the basic business model then, and again, think this is a long time ago, there was about a certain amount of commercials per hour, right? So let's say at the time, I think it was 14 minutes an hour, right? Which is still disgusting that a quarter of an hour was commercials, whatever. But we would own the first 4 minutes, and they would get the other 10.
So you'd still have to go sell it, or the syndicated company would pay you to have it?
The local would sell their 10.
Right.
And we would sell our 4 nationwide.
Interesting. Very cool.
And so we got to keep the 4. They got the 10. It's something along those lines. It would an ebb and flow.
So it's more or less a revenue share of how you would take that in.
Yeah, it's a bartering system. So that's how we did it, and they would be getting, in theory, a show with bigger guests, better quality. And then in a turn, they got to sell the bulk of the ads. The other story that's really funny is like we were in Jersey. We weren't getting a lot of big guests. We couldn't get big guests, right? We had no listener base, really. We were in Jersey. I found a store that was selling discarded interview CDs with rock stars, right? It was about.
I love this idea already.
Guns N' Roses, whatever. I edited out the answers, and then I asked the questions. So, hey, John Bon Jovi, what is it like? And I played the clip, and people thought we had all these big fucking
That
interviews.
is genius.
That's great.
Yeah, and so that's how we got a little bit of a name for ourselves. We'd also, this part's illegal, but we would give away tickets to shows that we didn't have, and then we just put all the phone lines on busy, and then we'd say, hey, Johnny and blah, 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 just won front row ticket. It was total bullshit. I always felt like if we got busted, I would just buy a pair of tickets and tell them, no, this is the guy we got to get tickets for.
That is the radio genius stories that I love hearing. That is amazing.
And then the last part I'll tell you, we were on a satellite, and then that company, I forget what year this was, the satellite was a decaying orbit, as all satellites are, and it was coming out of the sky. And they were trying to get everyone to switch over to a different satellite, which was ridiculously much more expensive. We couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford it based on our listenership at the time. So they said they were going to let us go. So I reached out to all the stations and switched us to CD delivery. And I think we lost 1 or 2 stations, but most of them were okay with CD delivery. But at the time, the CD machine, the 1-to-8 duplicator, was like $10,000. And I didn't have $10,000. So what did I do? I went online. I found schematics on how to build a 1-to-8 CD burner, how to flash a ROM, how to solder it all together. And I bought all the equipment and built it for $1,000, and then just started delivering the CD on all the stations.
You're kidding.
I was going to say, you are the most forward-thinking entrepreneur I've ever heard in our business.
And then 8 years later, I sold that CD thing for $2,000. So I made a profit on it 8 years later when we went to digital delivery.
You're Elon before Elon.
Yeah.
So then tell me how the transition went from that to now podcast and that kind of side of it.
So the radio show kind of blew up. We were on about 100 stations, and it led to me hosting a lot of music events and concerts around the country, like the Sturgis Rally, the M3 Festival, and a bunch of others. And then got a job part-time on MTV and VH1 as like a host,
Oh, wow.
And then this thing called Shiprocked, which was a music cruise. And I was their host for 10 years, right? I stepped down at 50 because I felt like, I said to them, there's some 25-year-old kid that would give their right arm to host this thing, and I'm doing it out of a sense of obligation. Like, I didn't want to do it anymore. So I stepped down 5 years ago. But the first 10 years I hosted Shiprock. And on year 3, they asked me, do you know anyone that would be a good comic for Shiprock? And I said, yeah, I know this dude. He's like a rock comic. I met him on my radio show, and I said, you should call him. So they reached out to him. His name is Big J Okerson. And Big J did the comedy on the boat on the 3rd or 4th year. And he says to me, hey, this Jay, I have a thing called a podcast. It's been going well. It's called Legion of Skanks, and it's starting to build a following. And I said, he goes, would you want to do a podcast together? And I said, honestly, I don't mean to be a jerk, but podcasting is for people that can't do radio. This was 11 years ago, right? And he goes, I appreciate it. Thanks anyway. But we stayed friends, whatever. And then over the course of that year, I heard so much about podcasting that I was like, you know what? Next year I was hosting again. He was on comic again. They had put us on a bunch of events together and we made each other's laugh. And I said, fuck it, dude. Let's try a podcast, right? And he goes, what are we going to call it? And I was going to do a morning show called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll a few years prior, but the money was shitty, so I didn't do it. But the concept was, at the time, I was going to go out at night and party, and whoever is still with me at 5 a.m. was going to come do the radio show with me. That was the idea, right? But so it's called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. I had the logo, whatever. And I said, he goes, what are we going to call it? I sent him the logo, and he goes, perfect, let's do it. And we just started recording in my house, which is where I am now. I was doing the radio show at the time. So whoever was coming to do the radio show, which at the time was in my apartment, I would say, dude, hang out, because radio interviews, as you know, are fucking 10 minutes long at most,
right?
And you're going to use 4 of those minutes if you're lucky. So I'd say, come hang out. After the radio interview, we'll do a podcast. Most of them were like, well, what the hell's that? We built up a library of like 8 or 10 of them.
It's an interview after an interview.
Say again?
It's an interview after the interview.
Yeah, exactly that. And then we, after about 8 of them, there's a rock band from the 80s called Living Color, and the singer is Corey Glover's a friend of mine, and he says, hey man, what happened to that thing I did like 2 months ago? Like, when is that coming out? I'm like, yeah, I should probably learn how to release a podcast, because at the time you had to build your own RSS feed.
Yeah.
So I learned how to do that. I made the website, and it was 10 years ago this past April that the show started, and it just built up from there. A few years later, we started the network, and that's what brings us all full circle here.
As part of the network, how many other shows do you have on there? Do you recruit other shows? Do people pitch themselves to you?
We get pitched a lot. At one point we had like 22 shows, which was a little unwieldy. Right now I think we have 15 or 16. And I don't like to have too many more than that, because they start getting lost in the shuffle.
Right.
But right now there's about 16 shows, and we own our own servers. We stream live to private servers, and then they come out time delayed and edited with commercials 5 days later. When we started the network, there was no Patreon. Nobody was doing that.
No.
We were the first to do like a paid early release. Nobody else was doing that. And that's how it started 8 years ago now.
I love that.
And this all started out in your apartment?
In my apartment. Yeah, it's crazy. Wow. And what's funny is when we started with 4 podcasts. 3 of them were on one day, 1 was on the other. I was like, all right, I have one crappy day at my house where people are there. But then over the course of a few months, we started signing other podcasts, and then there was 10 shows, and every day there were people in my house, and I was like, I'm going to fucking lose my mind. Like, I would have a deal with people like, look, you have to be out by a certain time, and I'm 55, but I'm still single, right? So I would, at the time, let's say it was 8 years ago, I was 48, 47, whatever. I was coming home on a date, and I told the band, the podcast, be out by 9:30, guys, so I'm coming home at 10. No problem. I bring a girl on a first date back to my house, and there's 8 dudes sitting in my living room, and she thought she was going to get murdered or worse. And I was like, guys, what the fuck you doing? They're like, oh, we decided to do a bonus episode. I'm like, go fuck yourself, man. Like, this is my house. And then I told my partner, if we don't find a studio soon, I'm going to have to shut it down. And we found studios, and we've been doing it in those studios now, I think 7 years.
That is amazing.
The question is, did the lady friend stay?
No, she did not stay.
She now hosts the other podcast.
She ended up blowing everybody. No.
The Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll was formed.
I'm thinking of the opening scene from Old School. I'm here for the gangbang.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm here for the podcast.
Yeah, I'm here for the podcast.
That is unbelievable. All right, so in your journey of doing all these things, you've had rock stars, porn stars. What is the most what the fuck moment that almost did not make it air, or what has gone on in your life that made you go, what the hell was that?
Well, I'll tell you what's funny is, first of all, on the show, when I started it, the whole idea was, I hate to sound cliche, but as I don't know how old you guys are, but the barometer that all else are compared to was Howard Stern, right? And I thought of myself, like, what would we do if Howard had no rules and could get away with anything? I didn't want to be all sex. I wanted to do sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I wanted to legitimately bring on comedians, rock stars, porn stars, interesting people to talk to. So we would mix it up, And I tend to never edit the show. Whatever happens, happens.
I'm the same way. I do not edit this show in the least bit.
The only time I do is if someone says to me, I can't have that air.
Yeah.
I said something, so that will.
I would say that's one of the few martial laws of podcasts. Like, hey, I said a name that's not supposed to be said, or
yeah, I will take that.
I discussed something that could get me in trouble.
But the wildest things for sure, and I've talked about these a couple times, so I apologize to anyone that's heard these stories before. But drugs, there are no drug stars, so you can't really bring on. I mean, I guess Charlie Sheen, but that's about it. As far as someone who's a famous drug addict, So, and I don't do any drugs. I've never done any drugs. So there's not much you can do in that world. My co-host at the time, Jay, would smoke weed and we'd drink, but that's not, for most people, not what you'd consider drugs. And I always would just lean into the fact that, well, it's just a fucking name. It's a common term.
It's a rock. It's a very rock name.
It's to set the stage of what you're listening to.
Right.
But I made an offhanded remark. If we have a broken million listeners, I'll start. I'll try a drug on the show, and that led to once a year trying a drug on the show.
Wow,
6 different times, and all of them real, like not bullshit. I hated them all, but those are crazy moments, especially with the fact that I also started a health and wellness podcast, which is hilarious. So the same week when I was turned 50, I thought it would be funny to snort cocaine off of a porn star's ass for my 50th birthday on the air. Was the same week I was planning the episode on meditation for the Good Sugar podcast. And so that was a moment of like, well, what the fuck am I doing right now?
Who was the porn star?
Oh, I don't remember. It's 5 years ago now. I couldn't tell you. Yeah, but I've tried.
That is unbelievable.
Drugs. And I mean, we really pushed the envelope on the show. Like, especially now it's a little harder as I'm 55. It does feel weirder, but we did like Jay and I went on. We did a contest of whose jizz weighed more. Right? We did a contest on hiring $100 and $1,000 escort, and if you get blindfolded blowjobs, which one would you pick when you take out the looks and you take out the anything else? It was just we got our blindfolds on, headphones on, and got 1 minute blowjobs, and then had to pick which one you like better.
Which one did you like better?
We both picked the $100 girl.
Was it and the then
we've done go down on a girl contest and see which one she liked better. Like, we've done ridiculous things. We just had a clip go viral. We did with Shane Gillis a few years ago, where 3 girls, we called it Smell My Finger, and 3 girls played with themselves. We smelled each girl's finger, then we got blindfolded. And then they did it again, and we had to see who could correctly identify the girl by her smell. Right?
Where are you coming up with these ideas?
I have a lot of mental problems. But then the other side of this is we've had Mark Cuban on. We've had Neil deGrasse Tyson on. We've had like real people on the show.
Incredible.
And then you throw in this. Like I find it hilarious that you were just enlightened by Questions of Life by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And then you watch the Blow a Yoki episode, which was which one of us lasted longer in a karaoke duet while we were getting blowjobs. Like, just dumb shit, So that to me, like,
where do I apply to be a part of this network, man?
Yeah. And it was just all about that. I always feel you should never be able to identify yourself or describe yourself in one sentence. Like, you should have different facets to your personality. There should be different things that make you who you are. And that's me. I love music. I love comedy. I like being an idiot. And I also run 30 miles a week and try to be healthy and eat well. So it's fun to have all those different aspects to your life.
So I guess it's safe to say that you enjoyed stepping out of the radio limelight into the podcast, because you would not be able to do any of this on radio.
We did a lot of things, but nothing that bad. But what I think is radio, and I'm sorry to say this, but radio does not matter anymore. It just doesn't. It's not where it was. I wish it would be. I think that radio made a lot of mistakes. I think they could still be relevant, but they're not, right? But what I miss, there is nothing like this, which is when we were live on, I think the most stations we were on when we were live was about 50, right? So when you're live doing radio on 50 stations across the country, and what's happening is only happening once, there's never going to be a record of it, and it's there or you miss it. That was a wild energy. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
It can't happen anymore. I mean, even most radio shows are, even if they are syndicated nationally, they're not live. You know, they're certainly not.
No.
Yeah, so it's just that energy I miss. And also, there was something fun about trying to figure out how to do things with a censor to get away with something is fun. When you can just say fuck, shit, cock, piss, like it loses its
it loses it fast. My buddies and I, we were one of the few people to get a show on the Howard Stern channel in 2011. Cool. And it was on the Sirius 101. It was the Abe Cannon show. And I remember we all had the conversation like an actual, group phone call with our boss, Tim Sabian. And I remember him saying, welcome to the Howard Stern channel. There's just one rule you can't break. Nothing can be penetrated. No penetration. That was our one rule. And I remember for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, we were trying to figure out how would we even, if we wanted to do something like that, what would we even do? We couldn't really figure it out. You just smashed through about 7 of those, and I would have been like, that would have been a great idea.
We did this thing once where we got 5 dudes to come in that were of different races, right? And then a girl agreed to get blindfolded and blow each guy. And for every guy she correctly identified their race, just based on a 10-second oral, she would get $100. And if she got all 5 right, she got double the money. And we called it International Street Meat.
Oh, my God. And how'd she do?
She did no better than Chance. I think she got 2 or 3 right. But the funniest thing was, one of the guys was a former intern, now producer on the network. He was the first to go. He was the white guy. And she went first with him. And she said, I think this is the black guy. So he, they weren't allowed to talk, but he, visually was thrilled.
Oh, I bet.
That she thought he was the black guy. But after she did all of them, she was allowed to go back and reassess.
Oh, wow.
So she went back to him. She goes, I changed my mind. I think he's the Asian guy, which could not be better.
That could
great moment on the podcast.
As far as all the things that you've done on that, the ridiculous challenges, bets, all this stuff, is there one that you would not do again? Where you're like, you know what? That was a dumb one.
Well, I mean, I've done things there's all these things I would never do in real life. I don't do drugs, but for the show, I'll do it. I would never do a drug again. I hate them all. I'm not made for drugs. I don't like that. The girls peeing in our mouths, I wouldn't do that one again. That wasn't fun. Getting our prostates checked on the air while Jay and I were in a loving embrace was not fun. There's things that I will do because I think it's good for the show. It doesn't mean I want to do it. But generally, I wouldn't say no to things. If the only time I said no, we were in this room, this was before we moved into the studios. Jay would always have the way of taking it one step further. I would come up with an idea, and then he would figure out a way to make it even worse. Right? So his idea was a girl that was coming in, and she was a porn star who specialized in scatological porn, involving shitting. And so he wanted the girl to shit in our hands and us high five each other. So I said, I will do it on one condition. We do it at your house, not my house. And then he changed his mind. So we didn't do it.
At least not my house.
Yeah. I don't want to have to be cleaning shit off the walls.
No, that would.
When we did the contest of whose jizz weighed more, the punishment was you had to take the winner's jizz, pour it in your hands, and use it like soap. And he lost, Jay, and he had to do that. He almost threw up.
That would be awful. Is there a celebrity or a person that you've interviewed where you went, you know what, this person I thought was going to be awesome, and that was the worst?
It's an interesting mix of back and forth. There's been countless times where I thought I would hate the person and love them, and thought I would love the person and hated them. I mean, that happens more often than you'd think. I'm sure you know that too. You come in with such ideas that you think something wild, that this person's going to be great, or this person's going to be an asshole. I'll tell you an example that sticks out. The girl that does the voice on Rick and Morty, she does the sister. She's also Fraser Crane's daughter. What the hell's her name? Name's escaping me.
In real life?
Yeah. What's Fraser Crane's real name?
Kelsey Grammer.
Spencer Grammer. That's the daughter.
Oh, I didn't realize that was his daughter.
Yeah, she plays the
Rick and Morty.
The Rick and Morty girl, the sister, Summer. She plays Summer, right? And I'd watched a couple of interviews with her. We did a Zoom episode, which was during the pandemic. And she just came off horrible. I thought, oh my God, but it's a big show. The season was starting. I'm like, let's bring her on. And we bring her on and she's awesome. She was so much fun. And at the end of the episode, I said, I got to tell you, you seemed awful and then like the episode that she picked that I told, she was like drunk and hungover, and it was the first thing that come up and it changed. Like I could not have been more off about her, right? And then what's funny is, and I've talked about this a few times, so no big deal, but after the show was done, I said to my co-host, I'm like, I feel like she fucking liked me. And he goes, you're fucking nuts, right? And I just DM'd her on Instagram, and we ended up going out on a couple of dates, which is hilarious.
That's awesome.
But it's still funny. That's funny. And another one was a band, I can't think of the name now, but I was shitting on them so badly after the interview because they came off like such assholes, and they were so much fun on our show that they ended up calling those people and took the YouTube video down because it was the first result you'd see, and they came off like assholes. I was like, I almost pulled the plug on this interview because you seem like such jerk-offs, but you're nice. And then they ended up getting that interview taken down, which I think is funny.
See, the thing I've always found interesting, I've been in radio now over 25 years, and the podcasting stuff, I've been in the space since about 2007, but only until the last couple of years I started doing this Barguments one. And I would say for a good chunk of it, I'm always shocked when comedians come on and they're not the way they are on stage. And when you're going back and forth with them, I've always been like, that's interesting. I always thought the comedians would be more. I've only had one or two that were like, whoa, I can't keep up with that guy. That one's really good.
The younger generation of comedians are much more who they are on stage.
Right.
The older generations, that stage persona was different than the real persona.
Yes. And
so
a lot of
that's a generational shift that I've noticed because I came up with that. My mom used to book comedy clubs in New York.
Oh.
So she had a club in New York called Upstairs at Green Street. And like I saw Chris Rock, Ray Romano, all these people that became huge. It was cheaper than a babysitter. So I was 13 watching these comedians at a club in New York when I was a kid. And a lot of them were different than they were on stage and off stage. But nowadays, like you take to bring them up again, like a Shane Gillis or a Dan Soder or any of these guys that are like the younger, they're 40s, but still that younger generation, not the they're very much who they are on and off.
Right. It's almost as if they know how to play that part of the game. The older generation, I've kind of found it to be more or less like if you call them, like this podcast used to get done a lot earlier in the day. A lot of times those guys were, they wouldn't even wake up till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So if they got up early for my podcast, you could tell they were like, wait, what show is this? What do you got? We're doing weird questions. And I would throw like a random what would you rather or Mount Rushmore. And they're like, I don't know. A lot of that
I
stuff.
definitely feel it's not as much. And also the amount of, at the end of the SDR show, we ask about your first experience with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. First concert you went to, first drug you did, first time you had sex. And the only people that ever gave me pushback on that are rock stars.
Really?
Never anyone else. And I'm like, oh, my wife's going to hear this. I'm like, does your wife think you were a virgin when you met? What the fuck are you talking about? Or they'll say, oh, I can't be associated with a show that says sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I'm like, it's in your name as well, you fucking idiot.
Sorry, Slash.
It's just a sign of the times. People are so worried about image. If I could go back in time, I would never have called the show Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll because it fucks our algorithm up. We have to just say the SDR show. It just, we got shadow banned on YouTube. We were going from like 10, 20,000 on an average episode to like 50.
Oh my God.
50,000, 50 because we started getting banned on YouTube because of the content.
I was going to say, it's interesting that the kind of content you were doing, that just goes out into the ether. You don't know who's going to watch it, who's going to find it. Right. If it was done on live radio, if you were on Sirius XM, it would be the most legendary of things. But when you throw it out there into the ether world, and unless you have Shane Gillis being one of the guys that's getting blown, sometimes it's just going to get lost in that shuffle. So it's interesting to see what the algorithm would pick up, because when we were Googling you, we were researching you, none of that stuff came up. Otherwise, these questions would have been a lot more entertaining.
No, it's fine. It's also that now we know it's part of the pitch to join the network because we can't put that stuff out anymore. So if you want to see the wild shit, you got to subscribe,
That is awesome.
Is it easier or more difficult now to book guests, say, when you first started?
I mean, it's a half a dozen to one. It's easier in the sense that the show is somewhat known. We were not in the last like 10 years, I'd say 7 of them, we were in the top 200 of podcasts,
Whoa.
but, so that makes it somewhat easier. But if they go and look and see that a porn star was on, a lot of the times they will walk away and they say no because they don't want to be affiliated with a porn star. But I would say in general, booking a show, and I'm sure you guys know this too, it's a fucking tap dancing routine to try and figure out not only who's good for the show, who you want to speak to, who can do it when you want to do it, if you can record it when they want to do it. We probably have 20 balls up in the air every month till we land on the 4 to 6 episodes that we need to record every month. It's wild how difficult it is.
It is funny that you mentioned that because that kind of the way I actually found you was that somebody I know that worked for the Stern Channel reached out to me and said, I started this website where we can connect people. And I just said, he goes, did you want me to do it for you? I'm like, yeah, it's Barguments, I'm looking for comedians, radio people, celebrities, blah, blah, blah. And I got pitched so many people that I was like, these are terrible. And then a couple of people, they were like, I could do it, but it has to be Monday morning at 9 a.m. And I'm like, that's impossible. And then I got one for you, and I was like, at least I've heard of you. That's the first one I've heard of.
That's funny. What's funny is that's how we ended up. It took us 2 years to book Mark Cuban, right?
Wow.
2 years.
How I found out was Friday, like a Thursday or Friday night at like 8 p.m., I get a text message saying, Mark can do it tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. if that works. I'm like, well, fuck yeah, I guess that works. And I could not find a co-host. No comic was willing to get up at 8:30 in the morning, so I did it by myself. It was just me and Mark for an hour. And, so things like that will happen. Sometimes, like we just had Akon on, and that came up last minute. And they only wanted to give us 20 minutes. I was like, I can't do a 20-minute interview. I just can't. It's got to be at least 40 minutes because of the way the show is structured, and then the response was funny. They said, it's fucking Akon, dude. He's a legend. I don't know what to tell you. And I said, I agree with you, but I can't do it. And then they came back to 40 minutes. So that's good.
I should footnote this, that if it is somebody like Mark Cuban, I will do it at whatever time they want it to be. But if it's...
I just can't air it because we have to do 2 commercial breaks in the hour and whatever.
If it's Eric, the improv guy, in someplace in Poughkeepsie, I'm not going to do it at 9 a.m. for his liking. But if it's Mark Cuban or Akon, have at it. Why not? I've also found out that even just from being in radio, whenever someone says, hey, we can only do 20 minutes of it, if that person likes what they're doing, no one is stopping them from bumping out of it, especially if it's Akon.
Well, I have a story for that. So years ago, I was doing radio, and I was interviewing Sammy Hagar, right? And as I'm walking into the interview room, the publicist says, you got 20 minutes. I said, cool, no problem. We're doing our interview. It was my first time meeting Sammy, and we just get along. For whatever reason, we get along. And this is maybe my second year in radio. And as it's like 18 minutes, I start wrapping up the interview because I know we got to stop at 20. And he goes, oh, wait, no. He's like, I'm having fun. We could go longer. I said, I was told 20 minutes. And he said, no, we can. And he looks at his publicist. He goes, we could go longer, right? And the publicist gives him a thumbs up. Yeah. So we go 30 minutes. Great. I wrap up and leave. And as I'm leaving, he goes, that was great. And the publicist goes, that was great. And as soon as we're out of earshot of Sammy, the publicist says, I told you 20 minutes. You just fucked my whole day. You are never going to get one of my guests, Are you serious? Again. I said, I didn't know because I told you 20 minutes. And then for years, we never got Sammy again. And then he switched publicists and we did. But ever since then, whatever they tell me, that's the time I give. And very often I'll get emails. Why'd you stop the interview? Why is Ralph always ending the show? I'm like, well, if I'm told we have 30 minutes or we have 40 minutes, I keep it at that. It just makes life easier.
There was a time back in college when Dan and I were doing our college station, and I hit him up. I'm like, Dan, Tom Arnold's going to be at whatever bar filming the best damn sports show. College station. We have no idea what we're doing. We're just trying to figure it out. We go, and Dan somehow gets the number of the publicist. Do you remember this, Dan?
Oh, I remember. That was when I started becoming how do I book a guest?
Yeah. And for 2 weeks, went back and forth, and all of a sudden the publicist says, yeah, he can come on tonight. We're like, well, shoot, this is the night that we actually are airing our show live. It's not a podcast. So we're like, heck yeah, let's do it. We made it seem like we were some major radio station. We're just a stupid little college show. Got him to come on.
I remember it vividly because You said we went in the bar, we were drinking, we were hanging out the whole time, and then I went right to the publicist, and I was like, how do we work for a radio station in Chicago, how do we get them on? And I would say almost every day I was talking to this lady about this one little interview we got, and it was actually a pretty good interview, but I remember being like, oh my God, I don't know if I could deal with this for the rest of my career, just having to like hound people like this. And then all of a sudden, it just happens.
We booked a lot of people just by DMing on Instagram. We booked, and the idea is like seeing people you think are going to get big, like Mark Riboulet, who became huge. He did my show because I saw him on YouTube, and he ended up he was a nobody at the time. Same thing with Jelly Roll. Like I saw him early on. We DM'd him, and he said, yeah, come on. And then he blew the fuck up. So it's a mixture of finding people that are big and then finding people you think might get big and doing. Yeah. I always will look up if a band is pitched or a comic or whatever. I don't look and see how many followers they have first. I look and see, do I like them first and then decide.
That's
a great way to look at it.
I like it.
Barguments.
It's that time of the podcast, the Barguments, which everybody pretty much comes for, but with Ralph here, I don't know if I even need to do any Barguments. You've answered way more what would you rathers than I could even put together on a list, but I somehow got a few left over for you, bud. So we're going to just throw some ones at you. They don't have to make sense. It's just stupid questions and arguments that we can go back and forth on, and we just want your opinion, if that's okay with you.
Sure. You know what's funny, by the way, when I was first told about the show, I assumed it was done at a bar.
Soon.
We are actually ramping up for that. We are going to be doing some live shows soon. But to be honest, this is an idea I've had for a podcast, a radio segment for so long that I was just, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I wanted to rotate in third person and just arguments and things you would do at a bar. So for me, it just made for a fun time. But very soon, Joe and I will take this show on the road. So for the first argument we're going to throw at you, let's give you this one. The Mount Rushmore, the top 4 of the most iconic radio podcast voices ever, excluding our own, of course. Who would you put as the most iconic radio podcast voices of all time?
Obviously, Howard is number one, because if you do a podcast or a radio show of any kind that involves a girl in a sexuality way, they will always say, oh, like Howard Stern.
Yes.
Nobody would say that. If I'm going to be a movie producer, you'd be like, oh, like, Quentin Tarantino. No one says that, but
yes,
only in radio of any sign, Howard is probably number 1 and number 2.
He is the barometer and the measuring stick that I think every radio show and podcaster kind of goes, where would it stand with that?
Yeah. And then for me, as far as people that stick out, that really affected me, I'm going by who affected me. It's Opie and Anthony, because they were the only radio team that I actually one time sat in my car. I used to be a strip club DJ, and I was sitting outside.
I did that once.
What?
I did a strip club DJ once, and then when I went outside, the boss got fired before I even got done. But go on.
Okay. I did it for 10 years. But I was sitting outside the strip club waiting for a bit to end, which I'd never done that before. And then to become friends with Anthony years later, and we were the first guests on when he started his, he got fired from Sirius and started his other thing. Jay was the first guest of I think that week.
That's awesome.
And it came from me not knowing them, emailing them and saying, come on our podcast and talk about what happened. And then his, I forget the guy's name that was like running his shit, wrote back, if Jay will come on the podcast on his show, he'll come on yours. So we drove out to Long Island and did that. And
that's awesome.
So that'd be number, I guess, do you put Opie and Anthony in 2 and 3?
No, I'll give you 2. Though that duo was so, I mean, they were probably one of the only ones that took it to Howard as well. They were the ones that were on that level and competing with him.
Right. And then number 3, I would say, because I remember I used to listen to them driving home, was Ron and Fez. Ron Bennington, I think, is one of the best people in radio. I don't think there's anybody better than Ron Bennington. I think he's
You know what? That's a name. That's a name I don't know about, and I'm going to Google when we get done.
Yeah, Ron and Fez. Look up Ron Bennington. Just fucking brilliant guy. And then the last one I would say, I remember listening to them because they'd be on radio. I'm just doing radio. I'm not doing podcasting.
It's fine.
10 million podcasts. I used to think there's no way someone is this funny. He is being handed info ahead of time. But I then, he came on my show. I've done his show a few times, and he's done mine. And he is just that quick. It's Adam Carolla. Even though don't necessarily.
Carolla is one of the best radio guests in the history of radio guests.
Yeah.
That guy.
Those are my 4.
I would say, you know what? Just to be on the safe side, we can just do radio personalities. It's fine by me. Yeah. Because, if you're going to do podcasts, there's only one guy that would be iconic, and that's Joe Rogan. And he can have all 4 heads on that one. Yeah. That guy influenced. He influenced an election.
And this is not, I'm not throwing shade at Joe Rogan. I've just never made it through a 3-hour podcast. I just can't do it. I don't
know how he does them so long.
You know what? But when you only do it once a week and it's the people that he wants to talk to.
It's still, I don't care. There's nobody I want to talk to for 3 hours.
I agree.
Not a single person.
And he works out with them for like 2 hours before then. But
you know what's funny? I'll give you a quick Joe Rogan story. Joe has rented our studios once or twice.
Wow.
For free when he's in New York. I think twice. I could be wrong on that. But when I was in LA, this is like probably 7 years ago, after he used our studios, he really liked these little pop-up things that I have on the table. They're flush, but if you pop it up, it's to plug in the headphones, has a cough button, a dial for volume, and then you could plug in USB source and it'll come up on
the thing. It's like a bouncing. It opens up and you just imports. Yeah.
Right. And it had our logo on it. It was really cool. I found the company and got it made. And his producer reached out to me and said, Joe really liked those. Can you tell me where to get them? And I told him where to get them. He has them in the studio now, but I'm in LA and he calls Lewis, Jamie called Lewis and said, hey, we have these boxes. And he said, can you show us how they work? Or I said, I went to the studios before I moved to Austin.
Wow.
And I'm looking, I'm like, guys, you are the #1 podcast in the world. Do you not have an audio guy to plug this in? Like, you need me to show you this? That's fucking crazy. And he's like, yeah, we just don't know how to do it.
That was before the $100 million a year. We'll give you that one.
He still was. They had the money to hire a fucking audio guy. Anyway.
Joe, who would be on your Mount Rushmore of radio voices?
You know who I used to love growing up? Lou Brutus. Speaking of syndication, because he was.
I like Lou Brutus.
He was on the old Rock 103.5 in Chicago back in the day. I know he's kind of been bounced around over the years, but Stern always going to be on there. He's always the measuring stick for any podcast, radio show. I mean, that goes without saying. Was it Covino? What was it? Rich Covino? I'm drawing a blank on his first name. He's on XM. For Rock Show. And then also on XM, there's a guy on a country show, Buzz Brainer, because he does a show on Fridays down in Nashville at Margaritaville. I would always love to go do that, but he always seems to be pretty entertaining. He's kind of more on the back end of it, but the other 3, I used to love Lou Brutus as a kid.
Lou Brutus was really good.
Yeah, because he used to do, he used to have jokes, segments. Oh, he was really, really good. Loved it.
I don't know Lou Brutus.
You don't know Lou Brutus? He was a syndicated guy too. I would definitely put on Howard Stern. I think that one's universally done by all of us.
Yeah.
Number 2, I would probably put on Casey Kasem, because that guy was not only like just the giant countdown guy, he was the voice of Shaggy. I mean, that guy was everywhere. And even now, that guy is still syndicated, dead. He's got more of a syndication following on Sirius XM, and they are constantly rerunning that guy. So he is number 3 for me, or number 2, I should say. Number 3, and I've had this argument a bunch of times, and I've said it before, and I've taught radio classes, I've taught a bunch of stuff, and I've always told my audience, if you're gonna do radio or podcasting, the best radio personality of all time, Howard Stern's the best interviewer. I would give him that, and I loved him, and he was so cool with us. Rush Limbaugh is number 1. Hate him or like him, I was a creative director for a station out here in Chicago, WLS, where I would have to use his audio for what that was. But I've never heard of a personality within 6 seconds of opening a show either pissed off or made his audience fall in love with him. He instantly got into it. There was no filler, no guests, no callers for 2 hours. And if it was a guest, it was Donald Trump. It was whoever that main person was. And he was so calculated, so perfect. And he was, before social media, that guy got himself on NFL and Fox, made a racial issue, and then boom, was the most viral guy when being viral wasn't even a thing. That was where that guy was in terms of that one. And then
I will tell you this. Let me interrupt you and say the cool thing about, and this is no shade in the world of podcasting, but the cool thing about a pre-social media world when jobs were handed out to the select few, the people that made it in those games were usually there because they were the best at what they did.
Yes.
Now
yes,
that's not
absolutely
necessarily the case. And also, you could get into the whole racial disparity or gender disparity. Sure. Like there were a lot of people that were phenomenal that were never heard from because of reasons. Maybe they were gay and that wasn't right for them, whatever the fuck. But regardless of that, the people that did make it were great at what they did. There's no way to deny.
And that's what it is. If Rush Limbaugh was the other way around, if he was a liberal guy, he would have nailed that too. He just knew what to say, how to say it, and how to deliver it in such a it's a bait right there. You clicked on it, you couldn't help yourself, and even if you hated the guy, you're like, I got to hear where he's going to go with this. And from a production guy, taking his audio and making promos out of it was the easiest job I'd ever had until Donald Trump came along, and those were even easier because that guy was just shooting at the mouth. But in terms of what that was in it. And the next one I'll give, it's a hard one to do because that person is so brand new, but Charlemagne the God has already destroyed everything that I've ever heard on urban radio before, and it's just completely have become the Howard Stern of that format. He is so worldly known. He is so accepted to the point where he's also influencing elections just by the kind of person that he's on, the kind of honesty that he gives, and the following that he has. It is unbelievable. Even if you watch it with your favorite rap stars, your favorite movie stars, the kind of connection that he has, even when he does podcasts with Andrew Schultz, everything he says is perfectly done in a way in which you have to listen to him.
Funny, he did SDR a long time ago, Charlemagne, and Andrew shows you how. It was funny when we first started. He'd call me and say, "How do you set this up? Like, how do you do like this?" Like,
wow,
just starting out, which is pretty funny. And boy, did they fucking blow the fuck up! It's wild.
All right, here's one for you. And I'm not sure you can even answer this question because I think you've already done this already. But if you could swap lives with any rock star for 24 hours, who is it going to be and why?
So here's a question. Is it I can go back in time?
Yes.
Is it right now?
Anybody.
I will open it up and just say you can go back anywhere in time or you can do anybody right now.
Am I my age? Is it like me right now?
No, you are a rock star at their peak performance of peak age of what it goes.
70s icons, because back then there were no rules. It would be Led Zeppelin or The Doors. It'd be one of those guys where, there was no negative stereotype to it. Although actually, the girl, I think I'm going to change it. I'm going to go in the 80s. I'll tell you why. I think the girls were hotter in the 80s than the 70s.
Yes.
And there was more self-maintenance and care. So I'm going to go prime Guns N' Roses. I will do Axl Rose in 1991.
Ooh, that one is good. Joey?
See, I would go, how do you not go Gene Simmons? Right off the bat.
Because I'll tell you why. The Kiss groupie was skewed more male.
Yeah, interesting.
Guns N' Roses did not. Guns N' Roses was.
Yeah, I guess if you look at that,
I don't know. I mean,
he got a lot of ass.
Sure. I mean, Gene's done this show. Gene's been right here in this apartment. And,
wow.
Yeah, and a funny side story on that is my friend Craig Gass, who's a comic from.
I know Craig. Yeah, I've had him before.
Years ago on my radio show, I knew him. We met through like Poison or something when I was hosting some event. We became friends. And he would call me and fuck around and pretend to be Adam Sandler, pretend to be Gene Simmons. Like he would do it all the time. And Gene was coming on my old radio show once, and he calls me to go over the interview, Gene. And I thought it was Craig fucking with me.
Oh, no.
So I was being a jerk off. I'm like, hey, Gene, how the fuck are you today? And he's like, I'm fine. And I was like, well, what's going on, jackass? What like that? And then he's like, just go on and go over the interview tonight. And of course, I never thought in a million years Gene Simmons would be doing that, And so I fumbled through that. And I didn't want to tell him, hey, my friend sometimes calls and pretends to be you, which seems worse, So I fumbled through it. And then he never did the show that night. And I had not spoken to him for like 10 years until he came and did the podcast 10 years later. And of course, why would he remember that thing? But I did tell him the story.
The somewhat of a similar story I've had with that one. When we were doing the Stern Channel stuff, and that's when I was able to book guests, no problem. And I remember reaching out to now dearly departed Larry King. And I remember reaching out to him and saying, to his people, hey, we do this show, blah, blah, blah. And the publicist said, how much do you pay for your guests? And I was like, to be honest, there is no budget. We're just kind of stringing this one along. Like, well, we appreciate it. And I go, if anything should change, if you should ever want to do it, have at it. And I told my buddy, the host, Abe, I was like, hey, this is what's going to happen. He's like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I went to the grocery store, and I was in the produce section. I remember getting a number that had no answer. My buddy Abe is really good at prank calls. He's one of the better prank call guys in the country with radio shows. And I just heard, Mr. Levy, this is Larry King. And I was like, okay. And I was like, all right. I kind of started messing around. Then I figured out it was really him. And I was just cool. And then for a minute there, I was like, first of all, I went from not being able to pay you. And second of all, okay, this is a little bit strange.
And so you went with Gene Simmons. So who are you going with?
For me, I'm going to go to the 50s. I'm going to go to Elvis Presley.
Oh, I don't know.
Give me Elvis, because first of all, that guy had his entire demo was female. He was the first king of rock and roll, and all he had to do was shake his hips, and every woman in the entire country was throwing themselves at him, and that guy could mow down anything he wanted.
He was addicted to drugs. They worked him to death. So to me, Axl could show up late. Axl didn't do what the fuck he wanted to do.
Hey, we're just talking 24 hours, buddy. I didn't say I want the guy's life.
What Dan just wants is hair, since Dan's got no.
And I would like the ability. I mean, that guy is an icon of icons. So, I mean, that guy walking around was, I mean, if you were to say to me, who's the biggest rock star between Elvis, Gene Simmons, and Axl Rose, Elvis Presley is number one 10 times out of 10.
Also, I think it's very telling. None of us said, well, I do Tom Waits because I have artistic integrity and I'd love to know what it's like.
Paul Simon was one hell of a songwriter. That guy was really
I'd like
able.
To be, Pollock or some sort of artist of some sort.
I should have thrown one in there and been like, I really enjoyed John Mayer. That guy was really doing top notch stuff. I
would love to be able to play guitar and create musical epics like Neil Diamond or whatever. Anyway,
all right. So we do one here that's called the ChatGPT argument of the day, and this one we're going to throw at you as well. Would you rather headline a sold-out tour with a band you hate, or host a podcast with your ex every week?
Oh, definitely tour. Who's picking? Who would want to? I mean, to me, there's so much more money in that. Why would you do? Who the fuck cares if you hate each other? You just have to do the Motley Crue thing where they'd be on separate tour buses, and they just didn't have to interact with each other until they went on stage. That's easy.
All right, you know what? That's probably the best argument you're going to make, and I have no argument against you.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I'd rather be on tour. I mean, I've seen, was it Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie be segregated backstage because they don't like each other very much. Yeah. So you could avoid each other and make a lot of money that way.
Yeah, but also, if you would have had a caveat that you're making the same exact amount of money, I might sit home in my underwear and do a podcast, but my guessing is that if we're looking at the two things, one is making you a shit ton of money and one is not.
That's true. Well, I don't know. If you're with your ex and you guys are fighting and she's calling you a fucking dickhead or a short dick asshole, I'd be like, you know what? There's something to this show.
Yeah. By the way, I think I hit a little too close to home with you there. Short dick asshole. That's a specific argument.
See, you can still go out and go on stage and have some drinks and just avoid the other band.
I like to narrow down my question to you, buddy. I like to get right into what it is that I'm looking for.
Yeah. Also, to know that feeling, to go sold out every night for a tour, that'd be unbelievable. To be watching a stadium with people sing my songs or whatever, that'd be fucking awesome.
That's true. That's true. All right, well, I'll give you one more to go out on because that was one we couldn't really bargain against. But what would be the worst song to lose your virginity to?
Well, I'll tell you a story that sticks out. It's not what I lost my virginity to, but it is a good story about having sex with a girl with a song. I had broken up with my first serious girlfriend. I was probably 18 to 23 or 24. We were together for 4 or 5 years. And I was miserable. Then finally I went out one night, got a little drunk, picked up a girl, went back to we actually made plans to first go see, I think it was maybe the second Batman movie, right? And we're walking into the movie theater. And all I hear is, oh, God. And I look, and it's my ex with her boyfriend that she left me for.
Oh, my Lord.
Of all the theaters in New York, you know, and we walk in. Thank God I was with a girl at least, right? So see the movie. I'm in a bad mood. We leave. We have a few drinks. I get drunk. We go back to my house. We have sex. And then like I'm sobering up a little, and I realized that the final countdown by Europe was had started again on my playlist, on my CDs at the time. And I go, oh, that's weird. The final countdown's playing again. And she goes, it's been playing for an hour.
Oh.
So she thought it was my fuck song. That big.
That's hilarious.
My dick, and she thought I was a lunatic, but it turned out I was just drunk and didn't realize it. So that's my story. The worst song would be that.
Joe, do you have one that would be the worst song?
I don't know if I could come up with a song, but I think something by Static X would probably do it.
That's not bad.
That or maybe Slipknot. Like, I mean, that hardcore heavy metal, I don't know if you could really get it on or something like that.
I would think the song "Why Can't We Be Friends" would be probably the worst song we could listen to. If I'm
worst song, I'd go Baby Shark. And then you tell the girl, I'm sorry, it's the only way I can ejaculate is to that song.
We need to sing it. We need to harmonize on that one part. All right, Ralph, thank you so much for jumping on Barguments, man. You are more than a pleasure. We appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
This is Barguments. Once again, I am Dan Levy. He is Joe Filippo. And you can download this podcast any platform that you want to go ahead and do that. Don't forget, we're on YouTube. We have a Facebook page where we do all kinds of Barguments, and it's very active. Feel free to jump in and join in on that. And I'm also on WGN Radio every Monday night with John Records Landegger, where we debate food. And every Friday afternoon at 2:30 Central, I'm on the Hammer and Nigel Show on WIBC Radio in Indianapolis. We do a Bargument weekly with them as well. Once again, for Joe Filippo, my name is Dan Levy. We'll bargain again soon. See ya.